Welcome, everyone, to this week's Daytime Dialogues. It's a real pleasure to welcome back to KINS Rabbi Kroll. And please God, with Rabbi Kroll and back in the shul, and for some reason his background is different than the KINS one. But it's just good to see him. And as some have already noted, it's good to see that he has a COVID beard. It's really good. Thank God, we were pleased all these years to have relationships with the Krolls and to keep on hearing. I'm just curious, Rabbi, how's the family doing? How are the kids doing?
Everyone's doing great. People know, but we have one more child than we had when we were in kins. So the three older girls are all doing great, and the baby boy Sally, who's a little bit over 2, is also doing great. Thankfully, right before all of this started, it was actually on March 1st, we were able to celebrate Rayleigh's bat mitzvah. So thank God that her bat mitzvah was the last bat mitzvah of her class that was able to be celebrated, and we're thankful for that.
And you're in the ground zero
Yeah.
of when everything happened. SAR closed first. SAR had the first responses. How long have you been closed already?
We were closed. So I said the bat mitzvah was on Sunday, March the 1st. So on Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, March 3rd. I got a phone call a missed call at 6 a.m. from my brother, who happens to be the principal of the school, and I'm the assistant principal at. And I missed the call, and then I got a text message from him and said, "Call me." So a million things raced through my mind of what it could be, and it was that a parent in the school, actually a parent of a student that I teach, was all over the news. An attorney, the attorney from New Rochelle, who's a parent in our school, who had been sick in the hospital, like suddenly taken ill, had been diagnosed with coronavirus, so that the school had to shut down. It was interesting that on that first day that we shut down, I mean, it just shows you, I think one of the lessons learned from all of this is how little anyone knows, and still how little anyone knows about all of this, and what's best. That everyone's really trying their best. The New York City Department of Health was actually expressed disappointment with the fact that we closed down. They felt that we didn't need to close down, and that we were acting out of too much caution, which could potentially create hysteria. But meanwhile, we haven't opened since, so we've been closed for 2.5 months.
Yeah. So who made that decision then? How did you jump ahead of the public health people? Do you know?
So the decision was made by the person who got the call was Rabbi Benny Krause, who was the principal of SAR Academy, the preschool through 8th grade. And I think they quickly made that decision just out of caution to close for the day, and then decide from there. Listen, we didn't have any snow days this year, so it didn't really seem to be like a big deal at the time to miss one day.
Yeah, and since then, I assume you've been doing everything like the rest of us do, living on Zoom.
Yeah. So there's one funny thing is, my brother will show anyone who asks, he'll show this email to, but he sent an email at the end of February, I think it was February 27th. He sent to the head of our educational technology and said, it was a short email. Hey, if this coronavirus thing actually comes to America and we have to shut down for a period of time, we should really have a plan together for online learning. So can you come up with something? So he came up with something over the weekend, which he created Zoom accounts for all of our teachers, and began to think about training teachers. And this headset that I'm wearing, they ordered 100 of these headsets off of Amazon to give to teachers. And this is before we even closed. They arrived the day we closed, and so for a period of time, the box of headsets was on our Director of General Studies porch in Riverdale. Anyone who wanted to come and get one could come get one. So, yeah.
There've been, we've been hearing about tragedies. Have there been funny things that have happened like this, whether in school, at home, in shul?
Well, there hasn't been shul. I do. It's like one thing off the top of my head. There is one guy in our shul who every Shabbos likes to go around telling people different puns, and I
Right.
think he lives for this and misses the fact that we're not in shul anymore. And so I feel like I feel like he's watching me, and he finds me on the street every Shabbos and comes and tells me the puns. In terms of like funny things that happen, like we have, I think it's enabled. Us at our school as a faculty to come together in ways in which we wouldn't otherwise normally come together. We'll have like a every other week we usually do it, like a faculty night on Zoom where we get together and run different activities with one another. It's just like fun and allows people to forget about what's going on. One of the things that I think here it's like a little, I personally don't have, and thank God, I think that this is one of the blessings that we had about having to close so early and shut down so early, is that it really helped mitigate and limit people's exposure. So talk about the amount of death and things like that in New York. It actually, in terms of our immediate SAR community, so it hasn't hit really hard, because we were inside for so long, and not spreading disease and not being exposed.
Are you seeing, like we're seeing in West Rogers Park, that people are getting the quarantine fatigue in real ways? And so if it's a nice warm day, and especially if it's a nice warm day on Shabbos,
Mhm.
it doesn't look like they're staying that far apart. Is the same thing happening in Riverdale?
So people are out. Like I know we went this past Shabbos was beautiful. We went for a walk. I and we went by, there's like about a 25-minute walk from us, there's this pond. People like a lot of times like to gather around, especially with kids. There are people there, but I think it was like everyone was wearing a mask, and everyone was kind of in their family cluster and were staying apart. They have like on the way, I drive by. There's like a series of parks right next to each other. On the way home, whenever I'm out, I drive by all the time. There are people there when it's nice. They seem to be, even when there seems to be a lot of people, it seems to be a lot of separate groups, and doesn't really seem to be like there's a ton of fraternizing. I know I see on TV, they show up at Central Park, they show all these different things, but that's not really by us in Riverdale. I think for the most part, people are taking it seriously. It's hard. I find it's like especially hard for the people who I see, not necessarily keeping social distancing the most, are teenagers. I think it's really hard for them, and I think it's hard for parents also to enforce it and to tell them, because they feel really bad for their kids and they don't really know what to do.
Besides the initial weeks of Zoom bombing that some of us were suffering from in the schools, which most
Hmm.
schools I think we've resolved,
Yeah.
um, have funny things happen in class?
Yes. I so so we didn't have any of that either, thank God, the Zoom bombing. But yes, so you'll have surprise, like for the students' perspective. So you'll have surprise appearance by teachers' children. Today we had this is a crazy story. We had a faculty meeting today, and all of a sudden in the middle of the faculty meeting, we were doing some professional development. Someone was presenting, and you heard someone singing a song. I forgot what it was to the tune of, but it was singing a song. It was an original song that was composed for someone's wedding, and meaning it was some teacher was practicing it. I don't know, or someone was practicing it, and they didn't realize that they were off mute. So there's plenty of things like that where people not realizing that they're off mute, and it brings her surprise. But this story, like it turned out the person admitted it afterward. We have a teacher in the school, one of the Rabbeim in the school. His brother is getting married at the end of the month in Israel, and he very much wanted to be able to get to the wedding. And he was trying, through any sort of connection and channels that he had. He couldn't get there. Finally, last week, he has a relationship. He has a relationship with a particular rabbi in Israel. Probably shouldn't give his name away. I'll tell you afterward. He has a relationship with a particular rabbi in Israel who was able to give him smicha through the rabbanut. He has smicha from YU, but he got smicha through the rabbanut instantly, and this is 4 hours before his flight. So he got smicha from the rabbanut so he could officiate at his brother's wedding, and he got on a flight. Within, I don't know, 4 hours of getting the smicha, went to Israel. He's in quarantine for 2 weeks and is going to officiate his brother's wedding at the end of the month and then come back.
I have a feeling it's not smicha. There's a special kind of.
Yeah.
You sure? Yeah,
Yes.
sure. Because smicha, I think some people have gone to jail for, but yeah, the Yeshur is that's a fun one to get also. And in terms of when you look back, if I don't know if you can look back yet because we're still in the middle of it, but I think we've kind of gone over the hump of the kinds of experiences. Is there stuff that when we go back to normal that will not be normal anymore?
I guess it depends on what going back to normal is, but I when we're planning for a September that's not going to be so normal. But I do think that once this is all past us, once we have please God a vaccine, I think there are a lot of things that we're going to do differently. We've had certain opportunities that we probably wouldn't have had we not been using Zoom, bringing in speakers to our students, running programming for parents. Like we have programming each grade. We have a parent night where we ask parents. We don't say that it's mandatory, but we ask them to come, and the attendance, depending on the year, it varies, but it's usually falls short of what we want for these parent programs, and it's like the perfect thing. We're not going to run them anymore in person. Run it on Zoom, and people will come. We have these SAR has these parent town hall meetings usually once a week. We have minimum 600 people who come onto these calls. So there's a certain amount of access that these online platforms allow us to have that we knew of their existence, but there wasn't really any sort of motivation to harness them. And I think that and there will be certain classes that you can have taught through that I assume we're going to have taught through Zoom also next year. If we have teachers who maybe aren't who are at risk, who can't come back in the building, or students who are at risk can't come back into the building, and things like that. One of the, speaking to a shul audience, I think like one of the real shames of this is missing out on that community. I think that people who don't have children in school anymore, or people who, we feel a tremendous connection to the community because of the school. Because I work in the school, Shira works in the school, because our kids are there. But I imagine if it's not as easy if you don't have your kids, and I think that places like an emphasis on. I think it states the importance of the school, but it also, for people who don't have kids in the school, like the shul is like really, really important, and I think that like people appreciate that now.
No, it's I see from KINS there are certain things. The Daf Yomi gets almost 20 guys every day now because there are people who couldn't have made it in the past. The drushas, we have about the same number of people who are in shul watching them online, but I do think the people who are watching them online are actually choosing to watch them online.
They're all awake.
Hopefully, or maybe it's what they do to at the end of the day to settle in. But we find a lot of things like that. We had we've been doing a lot of programming. On the other hand, not having the cholent every week. People have asked me, when do I think it's going to go back? I said, Yom Noraim will probably be somewhat different still. And but in the next few weeks, schools in Chicago will begin to either start opening or start having the serious pre-opening conversations of some kind. Is Are there things that, like, how long do you think this idea of people wanting to get together going to last? Like when the kids, I believe when people come back, when the kids at Ida Crown come back to school the first day, they're going to kiss the ground being back, and that should last a solid 15, 20 minutes. Are there things that when people come back that we should try to do differently? Let's focus on shuls for a minute.
Meaning, what should we try to do
Well,
differently?
Not the technology piece. It's with us. But I mean, the non-technology pieces. There are different things that you can imagine that how we should be doing things in shuls and schools. Shuls are.
You mean from like a health standpoint, or just in general?
No, how we run. Not the health standpoint. Yeah, that's easy.
I think it's kind of like what you said. There needs to be there. We need to find more ways to make the programming accessible. I imagine there won't be. I mean, we're already kind of going this way. We do this with in high school. We do this with our sporting events. We live stream them. I imagine that's going to be an option. I think that's going to be an option for a lot of things. That's not non-Shabbos related. And I think it's a way for people who are, like, if we think of it as a way of helping people who are homebound maintain a connection to the community. I think it's like like not only like a great thing, it's like a essential and like it should be like a mandatory thing for shuls to do. It's like a new way of looking after those who can't get out for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I'm thinking a lot about is it has changed the boundaries of a shul. Mm-hmm. So if somebody from shul X wants a shear, it may have been a little more complicated to cross the boundary of their shul and go to another shul for the shear. Mm-hmm. But now it's all online. People a la carte are able to pick the kinds of online services. And I'm wondering how that's going to change in terms of the definition of the in-person services of our community.
Right. In terms of membership and things like that also. There's the advantage of that, but if someone feels like they have their hands in 5 different shuls, I guess maybe it boils down to where you go and daven. I don't know.
Yeah. It may change how people daven. It may change how people do things. In the community, has there been a lot of chesed that's been going on in the community?
Yeah. So there are a ton of different things going on. A lot of initially when this first started, we have a bunch of different organizations that we partner with throughout the community, and all that they wanted was, we asked, what can we do? They would say, can you give us money? And out of health concerns, and B, because they needed it, because many more people needed their services. But now we've been able to do some good stuff. One thing we did was, you see a lot amongst, like, I've seen articles published in the paper educators talk about Zoom fatigue. Students sitting in front of their screens all day sometimes need a break. So what we've done is every couple of weeks, we had to come up with a catchy name for our online learning. So SAR, the mascot is the sting, like a bee, and we refer to our home court when we're playing, or the school, as the hive. So we our online school, we call it Hive Live. So what we do when we have this we have a half day of school.
I do have to interrupt. If
yes.
I understand, your brother was actually dressed in a bee costume when he was delivering the graduate signs.
That is correct. Yes,
yeah.
I had him on my bee high top sneakers also.
Okay.
So on that same I'm a New Yorker. I say sneakers. On that day, on that same day that Rabbi Tanki's referring to, when we delivered lawn signs to our graduating seniors, In Chicago, the principals wear suits when they do it. In New York, they wear mascot costumes.
I
But
have to make a bracha that I'm in Chicago. Yes.
yes. So on that day, it was on Lag Bomer. We let out school at 12 o'clock. We had 3 classes, and then we had a break for lunch. And each group of each student has an advisor. They usually meet with their advisors in groups of 10 to 12. So we combine different advisories, and we partner with Montefiore Hospital here. And because we usually work with the Children's Hospital, so we asked if there was anything that we could do, and they said no. But they would love it if we could do something for first responders. So we have a school of 593 students. We have our seniors are done with classes. Some of them did this, some of them didn't. But let's say we had about 460 students plus faculty members baking cookies together virtually in their kitchens, everyone with masks and gloves and disinfecting according to the way that they asked us to do it. And then in our different communities, we draw from about, if you know the New York geography a little bit, we have from Riverdale, we have from Manhattan, we have from Westchester County, New Rochelle, Scarsdale, White Plains. We have from Queens, we have from Stamford, Connecticut. We have Englewood and Teaneck in New Jersey. So we had different places where people could drop off the cookies outside of someone's home. And then our Chesed coordinators went around and picked up in the different communities. I happened to be delivering those graduate lawn signs in Queens, so I picked up in Queens. People picked up in different areas, and then we delivered. You can imagine if there's 460 something people baking batches of. We delivered about 5,000 cookies to Montefiore Hospital, and they sent us pictures. The coordinator there assured us that they were all eaten by doctors and nurses and other first responders in the Children's Hospital in Montefiore. So it was like I actually didn't think it would work, but it worked out. It worked out like very, very nicely. So there's like unique, opportunities, like that we've been trying to take advantage of. A lot of most of the stuff is, helping with in the kosher food pantry or with people who are maybe more homebound. We have people who bake challah every week for seniors who are homebound and deliver it also.
Now, there was a period of time where you and the family were literally quarantined, right?
Yes. So right after the bat mitzvah, so that's on March the 3rd is when we got that call that schools closed. I'd say on Wednesday night, that was March the 4th. I started to feel a little bit off, and then by Thursday. And I thought maybe it was in my head. I don't know. By Thursday morning, I had fever. I never had shortness of breath. I had a little bit of a cough and a runny nose. They hadn't said at the time about losing taste and smell as symptoms, so I don't even really remember. And I had for a period of time, like my chest hurt a little bit, but I didn't have shortness of breath. And we tried desperately. I believe that my symptoms coincided with the famous words, everyone who wants a test can get a test. And I found it very difficult to get a test. But luckily, actually, that Sunday, nurses from New York State Department of Health came to our house. This is when they're going to people's homes. And tested all 6 of us. So you can imagine having that nasal swab. I don't know if you've ever seen videos of that, what that looks like, or anyone's been tested in the nose of a 2-year-old. I have a picture of that. But
I'm turning off your screen sharing option. So.
Yes. So they tested all of us, and so then that was on Sunday, and then we found out that was on Sunday the 8th. Then Monday the 9th, which was Tanis Esther, right before Purim started, they called us back, and I had tested positive along with my older 2 girls, Rayleigh and Talia. Rayleigh and Talia never had any symptoms. My symptoms, I had fever for about 36 hours, and I said it was sick Thursday. By Shabbos, I was feeling much better. Sunday, I was totally fine. We got served with isolation orders by Westchester County, where we live in Yonkers here. But I mean, what happened was this is fascinating also. Now, as a follow-up to this, we were, they have protocols that they give us, which if you have children are impossible to keep. But, Shira and I, we had Corona bedrooms and Corona bathrooms. So, the kids who were sharing a bedroom, we moved out, like Shira and Ricky moved and started to share a bedroom with one another. I was in a room by myself, Ty was in a room by herself, Rayleigh was in a room by herself, and we didn't cross bathrooms for at least I think it was maybe even more than 2 weeks. Shira went last week to get an antibody test. She never had symptoms or anything like that, and she was negative for antibodies, which meant that assuming it's not a false negative, means that we were successful in our isolation things to make sure that she didn't get it. But meanwhile, this is another, I guess, advantage of being here on the front lines. I was able to give plasma. I was able to give blood plasma. I was actually Columbia University in their blood plasma research study. I was the first person in their study because I had been sick soon enough that when they were ready to start, I was eligible to give. I went there. It was the morning of. They had decided at 9:30 the night before that it was okay. I could go. They had to test me to see if I had antibodies. And when I showed up. The only person who knew that I was coming was the person who was in charge of the study. They hadn't told any of the nurses or doctors. They had no idea that anyone was coming. Long story short, I tested positive for antibodies. I even tested positive still for the coronavirus over a month after I had it, but they said they don't know what that means. And I was able to give blood plasma. I was involved in another study. This is there's tons of studies going on in New York at Rockefeller University, where you don't give blood plasma. They took a vial of blood, about half the amount you normally give when you donate blood. And they are developing, they had a story about this on CNN. Unfortunately, the television cameras weren't there when I was there. But what they're doing is they are taking the cells in your blood, which produce antibodies, and they're replicating those cells in the lab. So they're taking my cells and cloning them in the hopes of creating a ton of antibodies, which they could then use prophylactically and put them in pills and vaccines and things like that. And that university has done this with antibodies for HIV successfully, and they're using the same methods. And they said I went there. It was 3 weeks into their study, and the doctor told me that they had already seen success, but they needed to do more of it. And since then, it's been a month since I went there. So actually, in about an hour and a half, I'll be giving plasma again. And it scares me a little bit that it used to be that you could give plasma once a month, every 28 days. Now it's once a week. but after I'd given the actual blood, they said I had to wait a month before I give plasma again. So that's why it took me so long. But I might be, I guess, going and giving back next week also. So it's I said to them, how much, what's this plasma do? They said if it works, which they had success with, it has the potential to save three or four lives, which was it's a tremendous thing. When I was in giving blood the last time, the blood donation center is right up next to Muncie. And it was me and a bunch of Hasidim from Muncie giving blood. It was like a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. Everyone who was in there was Jewish.
They had a study that I think was 50% of the donors have been members of the Jewish community.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. Our time is really up, and it flew by as I expected. There's a lot of things that are coming up at KINS tomorrow night. Not tomorrow night, Thursday night is going to be Yom Yerushalayim. There's a whole series of programs. There's also a series of programs, which one of the nice things we have in Chicago, which I'm sure you have in New York as well. In the CRC, actually, all the rabbis of the shuls and some rebbitzins have gotten together to do programming starting Motzoi Shabbos, just to show you the lineup, a half-hour shiur in each, which will be for the community, which will be a lot of fun. And next week on this, we're going to have that Rabbi Dr. Aaron Glatt, So Rabbi Kroll will be able to check with one of the top physicians in this matter on how things are moving in the experiments you've been in as well. I thank you for your time. We miss the Kroll family. Please send our best to the girls and, of course, to Shira, who was watching, if I've got my list of attendees correct. And hopefully we met with approval. And I thank you very much for your time. And I thank everyone for tuning in today. Have
Thank
a
you.
wonderful
Thank you.
day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.